Have you all had a chance to take a look at the agenda for today? If not, let's go ahead and, or even if you have, let's go ahead and pull it up. You should be able to either find it from the email or pull it from the calendar. All right, quickie, what is going on with my? Chris also looks like he linked it. Someone linked something, yeah. Right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. You know, if you haven't had a chance to read through the June updates, there's a lot of really important information there. So please take the time you need to see what's happening in each of the related regions and departments. Just in terms of the sort of general flow of what we're working on, projects for, you know, this period, the biggest one is, or two, are launch and the budget. So actually, Chinna's here. Chinna, why don't you give us a quick update on launch prep?
Thank you, Derek. So we are really excited about all the cool things that are coming up for launch. Linked in the agenda is like a proposed agenda that is being finalized. And so as a reminder to all of the people who we communicated with about presenting, objectives for launch are due today. We are adding them to the agenda for breakout sessions so that people will know like what the purpose of each session is to help them choose what session to go to. So if you haven't at least created your agenda with the objectives, that's actually due today. Monday, we will be sending out like a formal email advising people about how to sign up. But if you look at the agenda, you can see that we're putting sign up boxes for all the breakout sessions so that presenters have an idea of how many people are coming to their session. We are requesting that people sign up for their particular sessions by July 29th, which will give presenters a few days to like prep before launch starts. To support presenters for launch, we may be reaching out to people, and we're in communication with Poll about providing Zoom room helpers so that we can have somebody who's in the session kind of help the presenter monitor the chat box or create breakout rooms or what have you, whatever assistance they need. In addition to that, I know there are some concerns that came up from people about wanting to attend various sessions, and our committee has agreed that we would like to record sessions to make them available so you can see in the folder structure we created. We even have a folder for the Zoom videos, and we'll be working with Poll on that. A couple of other reminders about launch to help make it successful is that PLC, there are some deliverables that Megan requested from PLC groups that are due by the 22nd of July. So if that doesn't sound familiar, please check your email and go back to that email that Megan sent for PLC groups, because we are going to be, again, using that information. And then make sure that you are meeting with your book study chapter partners to prepare questions in the book study guide. That also we would prefer if that was done by July 29th. And then the real exciting part is that we're going to be having some themed days across the launch days. And so day one is going to be for you to find a picture, like an old school picture, and for you to recreate a back to school, old school picture of yourself. So that will be on day one. So dress like back to school and one of your childhood and bring the picture with you, because we're going to do a little gallery walk. And then day two is going to be a partners hat themed contest. And there will be an amazing prize that we are developing for the winner of that hat contest. And women, if you want to wear your crown or your head wrap or whatever, but it's going to be a partners themed head covering hats contest to represent partners. And then on day 3, as always, you will get a little partner swag. So we're asking for you to wear that on day 3, and we will be taking a picture. Are there any questions about launch?
I'm just really excited to see what Chris brings to back to school picture day.
Were you wearing lederhosen back then? Or did
Oh, geez.
that come later on?
No, I might have to get a buzz cut. Because all my back to school pictures include me with 1/4-inch long hair.
Mm.
Done in the basement by my dad.
I'm wondering if we'll get a sense of what your chin actually looks like.
That's not happening. That's like Samson. I'm not going to shave off my locks.
Your wife can make an appearance and come in with scissors. I tried really hard to think about a way to do the sweet and tasty pastry tourney this year. I have to apologize to Noah, who's like already knows what he was going to do this year, like the day we had it last year. So maybe the next time we're in person or something, we can do it to resurrect that tradition. Eat lots of sweets while we're on camera.
Noah, if you feel empowered that you still need to make it, I would volunteer to receive it and treat it with the loving care that it
Partner
deserves.
pays for shipping and handling. I will send everyone baked.
Oh, I'm all over that. Anything else for launch? Any other questions, concerns, thoughts? Just a real appreciation for Uchenna for being the focal point of all that crazy planning and freneticness. Really exciting. I myself am feeling stressed that I won't actually get to see everybody in person for the first time, and it'll be my 12th year and not having an actual launch. So I'm a little bit bummed and stressed about that. But God willing and fingers crossed, everything will be perfect by mid-year so we can have a in-person mid-year. It was the one thing we preserved in the budget. So all the fingers and digits crossed for that. Speaking of budget, the next big project is finalizing the budget. And one of the things we've, sort of endured in the last month is $1.2 million reduction in revenue, mostly coming from district contracts. So we've made huge adjustments to budgets and found ways to maintain our responsibility for sort of leveraging and sustaining our staff the way we and the board really values. And we're in the final stages of presenting to the finance committee, not next week, but the week after, right, Rawa? Tuesday, the week after, the revision to the budget for next year. So once they get it and approve it, that's essentially our perimeter to spend against that expectation. Just so you know, we're looking at about a 5.2 spend against a 4.9 revenue for next year. The vast majority of it is philanthropy and Gates, in case you were wondering. And since the expansion of all the Gates project, that makes a kind of sense, going forward. Any questions about the budget?
Derek, so that means that puts us in the red?
It does for the year, except remember we got the PPP dollars.
Okay.
And we did spend them, but we also got all the revenue in that we were expecting that those dollars would subvert. And so we're starting the year with $2 million in the bank. Right.
Okay.
And so we'll still be very strong in a cash flow position at the end of next year,
Okay.
assuming we do a good job of managing our spend and, not go buy Ferraris or anything.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Does this affect anything for right now? Like when it comes to hiring or anything like that? Like, does this have a direct now impact at all?
It has and has had it already. I know that part of what we're doing are leveraging existing staff for some of the Gates roles. And so if you haven't gotten an update from that from your team leader, you probably will very soon. My understanding, and Rawa, you're holding this space, so correct me if I get it wrong, is that there still is a hire that we have to do for the Philly team?
Yes, it's we're working on things on the back end. So yeah, one hire.
Okay. But that will be the last of the hiring for this year. And so, God willing, in a creek don't rise, it's a really effective mathematic person who's Latino. That's just my wish list. Going for it. Okay. Or Latinx, I guess I should have said. The third project that we're working on is finalizing the goals for the year. There's a lot of work going into it. They flow from the board. So the board proposes a set of goals for the year based upon the evaluation that you are all a part of me and of the org over the course of the last year, and shared those with me, and I've shared them with my team. We've suggested some modifications, put some thoughts in to reduce them from 9 to 6, and recently we put that set of goals in front of the growth team and gotten a lot of great feedback. And so we're revising them yet again, considering that we are still working, next year in a kind of, managing cash flow and staying sort of frugal kind of way. We shouldn't be biting off too much more than we can chew. And so the goal is to move forward next year with 6 or so targeted and specific goals that are about building the org capacity to leverage this time to build our program space the way we need to, and to deliver on what we need to help our schools in this challenging time, but to maintain the capacity that we need to hit the ground running when districts are all set and ready to contract and do great work in the subsequent year. You will hear about all of those in part of my presentation to you at the launch sessions. And so just be queued up against that. Just know that what the goal is really for there to be fewer than what has been proposed, and for us to get clear about how we're going to measure them, how we're going to organize as a team to execute against them, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the 3 key projects: completing the launch prep and executing it excellently, finalizing our budget spend, and I've given you a sense of what that'll be, of 5.2 or so spend against a 4.9 revenue base, and finalizing the goals, for next year. In terms of key decisions we have yet to make, flowing from the goals is really finalizing what our scope for the org for next year will be. And there are a bunch of open questions about seeing as how our districts are having a hard time generating huge contract revenue for us. Our commitment to them then is more based upon the philanthropy that we're leveraging for their work than actually their own dollars, which gives us huge flexibility. And so what do we want to do with that flexibility? Do we use this time to model new program elements? Do we use this time to do more design? Do we spend some energy and effort looking at the marketplace in light of COVID and asking the question, what should be different about partners, given what this COVID challenge has raised about equity, in the public education space. So finalizing, the org scope is really some key decisions we'll be making, and you'll be hearing about that alongside the goals for the year during launch. Close upon that is finalizing the design for the organization for next year. Who reports to whom in related pieces. Chris is working really hard with his team in design sessions about how PDS and program implementation should be led and organized. And so at some point it will be great. You'll be seeing that flow chart and the logic model for it as a part of the presentations that we do for launch. And pursuant on that is really there's some reorg that's happening within the national office as well. And so you'll be seeing, the end result of all of that too. The idea being a flatter structure, all of us feeling a lot more as if we're one team versus bunches of different teams executing against, discrete pieces, more of an integrated and collaborative kind of frame is what we're looking for in terms of the design for next year. Last big key decision has to do with how we use Fridays. And so many of you are new enough that you may not have known that Fridays have gone through multiple designs in the past. When we decided to break into regions, we changed the process for Fridays. Prior to when we had regions, 3 Fridays belonged to PDS and 1 Friday was national, quote unquote. And when we broke into regions, we decided then that because we wanted the work to be localized and that folks needed time to do the planning and that are really specific to what's happening in their geographies and in their regions, that one of the Fridays would actually be, dedicated to regions work. We're reconcentrating the work and being essentially one organization going forward without regions, just folks being deployed in other places, but from one leadership structure. And you'll hear about that and see that going forward. But it raises questions then about, okay, what do we do about Fridays? And there's lots of questions related to that and lots of people playing in. Amanda and Cynthia have been playing a huge role in helping us think through it. Uchenna has played a role as well as Megan, because of course PLCs have been a big part of our Fridays this year, and so we want to think about what happens next year. The one decision we have made already is that there will be 1 Friday that's dedicated to national over the course of the year. And in that space, there'll be a whole host of professional learning options and shared decision-making and, performance management and all that kind of stuff. Ops-related pieces, all the things that we know we all need to be trained and up to speed on, but that we never seem to have time to pull people together to do. But how the others are going to unfold, I know that Uchenna and Cynthia and others have kind of developed a scope and sequence and a series of meetings and plans and structures that Chris is looking at and refining over time. So that particular calendar will be something that we also roll out during launch. Any questions about any of those pieces, starting with how we're thinking about Fridays for next year?
So since a plan is still being made, does that mean it's a possibility that some of our existing learning systems are falling within that National Friday? Okay. So it's a possibility that either like PLC or something else that we know already exists, and it becomes just like a longer day that
it wouldn't be a longer day because we're trying really hard to make sure that we don't all get too much Zoom fatigue.
Yeah.
And there's going to be plenty of Zoom fatigue as we know. So we're really trying to keep the actual programming time to 6 hours where we can, with breaks in between. But what it would mean is we would dedicate some part of those Fridays to that learning system. Go ahead, Uchenna.
Well, one thing, right, Derek, is that managing and leading it partners is staying as part of that National Friday. And then that's not completely decided yet,
okay. but our current plan is yes, for that to be kind of the beginnings of each of those days. That's our current thinking. And so, but there's some questions and concerns about that we're still trying to work out. Right. Other questions?
Derek, I have a question. I know that it's like, I know that there has been like a vibe of like the Fridays belong to PDS or they belong to National, but I guess what I would love to hear is like, what processes will we use to make sure there's like collaborative communication about how things are being designed? Like if you could to that briefly, because I just
sure. The only way that can happen is through collaboration on the design itself, and through folks being in community discussing the challenges and learning goals and objectives and related pieces and weighing the options, right? And so we know that most of the design for Fridays went a long ways before we had a chance to kind of pull us all together and think about what makes sense to happen in the nationals that has everybody, and what makes sense, you know, for it to be really kind of focused on skill building in the execution of the work, of which it's important that national folks play in, because we know, so for us to know what that work is, if we're writing about it, raising money for it, or staffing people to execute against it, but it's not exactly, you know, a direct line in terms of what's, you know, building what's necessary for the skills of the folks in the work. I think going forward, the expectation is that we're going to be much more in community around how we design these pieces, that that we still are committed to the fact that the equity vision and mission of the organization, of which the PLCs has been the kind of core mechanism by which we push that this year, is going to remain a core strategy and process going forward next year. And we just need to just decide together how that unfolds. The only other thing I'll say is that, and it's part of the challenge of also having the right content for managing and leading at Partners, right? There's a bunch of things that we're responsible for as an organization to be transparent about and to train you all on, in order to have expectations of you to execute against them. A good example is using ADP, right? I mean, it's now the mechanism by which a lot of stuff that's important happens. You know, your check stubs are there, right? I mean, it's pretty important stuff. And so there's a set of things like that we need time so that we know we're doing what's right, you know, by each of you as employees in the work. But that falls more into the managing space, right? But then there are these things that are about leadership. The skills we believe are important for anyone who is in this work, in this org, and sort of embodying our mission in the world. That particular set of competencies is being reinforced on every Friday, right? Whether it's leading in the execution of the work, or managing, you know, or leading when you're doing advancement, right? You're out there telling people what it is Partners values and why it is we're important to the work. We need to have alignment on what we're talking about when we do these things. And so the tricky thing is now to make sure that there's enough time when we're all together with which to do the things that are compliancy and managey, but that we're also together for the pieces that are about values and mission and purpose, and that are really about leadership going forward. And so we're working hard to put a scope and sequence together that manages those conflicts, but that also provides people with flexibility, right? I mean, if you're already a master of ADP, why should you show up for 5 sessions related to using ADP? Yeah, you got other things you can do with that time. And so we want to make sure that there's enough flexibility so that we're hitting folks where they are. If you have interest in playing in on these conversations, reach out to Chris and Rawa, because they're the ones for whom those times kind of roll up, or me as well if you want to give your feedback my way. Any other questions about Fridays, about the goals for the org, or about the redesign or the design of the org for next year, which are the kind of key decisions before we go to our input question?
I have one more. I'm sorry. Is it
No,
the
it's
third
okay.
Friday? Is it going to be the third Friday?
I think that's where we settled, Rawa.
Oh, we're still finalizing that. So once we get things more clear, we'll send out a proper communication.
Right. And technically, it doesn't have to be that predictable, because if it happens that it doesn't make sense because of when the holiday falls, or or when the testing at schools happen, and it's really important for a program to have that very next Friday, we're super flexible about that stuff, and that's part of the reason why we have to be in sync when we're setting up this time together. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at the input question. Let's see here. I have it already open. So one of the things I felt like I should have circled back on the email that went out about our experience with SenseMaker was that it came across, like a blast from a cannon, that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves in this organization. And in the time that we're in, where we have to stay positive, where we have to be super flexible, and where there's trauma everywhere. I mean, everywhere. We can't do that to ourselves next year. It'll just make it impossible for us to be there for each other and for our families and for our partners if we're unduly stressed. And so rather than kind of follow up on that email saying, hey, we need to do a better job of self-care, we thought instead that we would raise the question of whether among our goals for next year as an organization, should we also set goals related to self-care? And what might those be? What might those look like for the next year? Thoughts, questions?
I have a thought. This is Sam. Connected to that, I think that sounds great. And what comes up for me is thinking about the systems or the structures around ensuring that we can find balance and engage in self-care, and just this feeling that sometimes we talk about self-care as if like it almost creates a level of pressure around like, you're not doing the things to take care of yourself. But like, how as an organization can we structure things so that there is the balance and the breathing space to take care of ourselves? So I'm saying, yes, I like that. And like, I'd be curious around what are the structures we're putting in place to ensure it.
You have a suggestion about a structure that could put in place?
I think just like exploring I know there's certain things that some orgs do around on-off times of work, norms around communication, when we're sending things out, when we're not. Streamlining the number of emails that go out is, I think, something that some orgs do. Or maybe looking something at calendaring and like providing buffers, or like what are the norms around how we schedule meetings so we're not like requesting back-to-back times. Or I don't know, those are just some things that come up off the top of my head, but I think it'd be interesting to do an exploration of what other places do.
You just listed 5, and those are right off the top of your head.
Kind of. Put me on the spot again, Derek.
No, they're all awesome. It's just like you surely you've been thinking about this. And so what are some of the things other folks are thinking about?
Babysitting, Sanaya.
Offering to babysit my children from a safe distance.
Go in your pool.
What are other thoughts? Go ahead, Amanda.
I like to build off what Tanea is saying. I also think like, what are our norms around when people take PTO? Because I think so many of us are like, I don't want to miss an important meeting, but so many of us still are checking things and doing stuff like that on PTO. I also know, I think, Derek, that you've been good about communicating. I know Alex at one point had a conversation with me about how much PTO I was taking, like in a way of like, hey, make sure you're taking it. And during like these times when it feels weird to take PTO and you're like, well, where am I going to go? I appreciate when we're like having those real conversations about take your time off. Let's respect that. And really try to unplug as much as you can when you do that.
I think there's org norms, and then there's like team norms too. So even just teams, like I think we have to find a new way of working where it's like, okay, this week is happening. Who's taking PTO? Just like the awareness, because it's so easy to shoot a text and then get involved. And so I think we need to think about it like balcony view, and then more to the details.
I second what's been said, and I want to also something really simple that I've seen modeled that I think has actually, for the amount of effort it takes, I think has been really effective. Is I've seen folks use the warm-up time, which we already have a norm around, but to effectively use that time as a like recentering time. I'm gonna call out Uchenna because I feel like she's really great at doing this, and I think it's just simple and effective.
Sean's pretty awesome at that too. Cynthia as well. In the spaces that I've been. Megan?
Have a thought around having really clear role descriptions for all of the jobs that we should have, so that when you are doing a job that is not yours, it's very obvious that you are doing something that belongs someplace else. It's part of why we're hard on self-care is we're doing multiple roles. So that the reason that we would have the description is so that you can more clearly recognize the difference between being borrowed on something real quick or you're actually doing a job that's actually in another lane. And that is part of the reason why you're stressed and feel like you can't be gone.
And Megan, to build up that, like, how is it tied, if you're doing that extra thing, how is it tied to your own goals and like what you're doing? Like, so why did you take that role on? Is it that someone had to do it? Well, why was it you that had to take it on?
One other thing I would add too is self-care could also be just like, how are we refilling our cup? How are we helping to celebrate and affirm each other could also go a long way. And so a few years back, Tim did a appreciation survey that we did in the Bay to just look at how people like to feel honored. We didn't go too far with it, but it just also makes me think of like the power of the newsletter that Uchenna has been working on and just other ways to uplift each other. So that it's both like taking care of yourself, but how do we zoom in like in a collective approach around just helping making sure people feel replenished and honored.
These are all great ideas. Keep them coming.
I do want to acknowledge we are over on time. But if people have ideas, like, please send them our way.
Right. We have a couple of weeks before launch, and I know everyone's leaning in on their different, summer projects and pieces, but, also do take the time you need to tend to yourself and your families in this tough time. I know one of the things that we were saying in a meeting with the Oakland Unified School District Board the other day was that we often feel as if the problem is out there, right? And so we're so sensitive to the challenges that our teachers and our leaders are going through, trying to essentially pull their communities back together as a result of, this challenging time. But we also all have that, right? Our families, our community, our peeps. And so take the time you need to make that happen, so that when you come to launch, you can be fully present, excited about next year, and raring to go. Good to see you all. Thank you very much for showing up. Enjoy your weekends. Have fun, relax. Swim in that pool, Sanea, that I just heard about. Good to see you all.
I'm wanting to host next year's launch.
Ooh.
Sweet and tasty tourney and pool. Come on.
Ooh, sounds like fun to me. Let's hope we're all able to be in the same place at the same time by then.
Hope so. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.